As the sun set over the thickly wooded hills, the last rays of light glinted off the abandoned buildings of the forgotten town below. The air was still and quiet, except for the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze. No one had lived in this place for years, and even the animals seemed to avoid it. But for three adventurous friends, the allure of exploring an abandoned town was too great to resist. Samantha, Jake, and Emily had heard the rumors about the town for years. It was said that the town was cursed, and that strange things happened to anyone who dared to enter it. But to these three friends, the abandoned town was just a playground waiting to be explored. They had packed a backpack full of supplies, and with flashlights in hand, they made their way down the hill and into the town. The first thing they noticed was the eerie silence. The buildings were all in various states of disrepair, with broken windows and sagging roofs. There were no sounds of life, no rustling of animals, and no hum of electricity. The only noise came from their footsteps as they made their way through the empty streets. As they walked, they noticed that the town seemed almost frozen in time. There were old storefronts with faded signs, a post office with mail still piled up inside, and even an old movie theater with a faded marquee. It was as if the entire town had been abandoned overnight, and everyone had simply vanished. The friends explored the town for hours, searching through buildings and peering into the abandoned homes. But as the night grew darker, they began to feel a sense of unease. It was as if the town was watching them, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. Suddenly, Emily let out a scream. "Guys, look," she cried, pointing to a building at the end of the street. A faint light was flickering through the broken windows, casting an eerie glow on the surrounding buildings. The three friends cautiously made their way towards the building, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. As they got closer, they could hear the sound of music coming from inside. It was faint, but unmistakable, the sound of a piano being played. They reached the building and peeked inside, and what they saw made their blood run cold. In the center of the room was an old, rusted piano, and seated at the keys was a figure in a tattered suit. His face was hidden in the shadows, but the friends could see that he was playing the piano with great skill and precision. For a moment, the friends stood frozen in fear. They wanted to run, to get as far away from the town as possible, but something kept them rooted to the spot. It was as if the piano player had cast a spell over them, holding them captive with his haunting music. Suddenly, the figure at the piano stopped playing and stood up. He turned to face the friends, and what they saw made their blood run cold. His face was twisted and deformed, with bulging eyes and a gaping maw of teeth. He let out a low, guttural growl, and the friends knew that they had to get out of the town, and fast. They turned and ran as fast as they could, their feet pounding on the pavement as they sprinted through the empty streets. The growls of the piano player echoed behind them, and the friends knew that they were being pursued. As they ran, they saw movement in the shadows, the outlines of figures lurking just out of sight. The friends had heard the rumors about the town, but they had never believed them, until now. They turned a corner and found themselves face to face with a group of shadowy figures, their faces obscured by darkness. The friends tried to push past them, but they were surrounded, trapped by the creatures that seemed to be closing in on them. The figures began to lunge at the friends, their long, spindly fingers reaching out to grab them. Samantha and Emily screamed, their terror fueling their desperate attempts to break free. Jake fought back, swinging his backpack at the creatures in a vain attempt to ward them off. As the creatures closed in, the friends were suddenly blinded by a bright light. They shielded their eyes, and when they opened them again, they found themselves surrounded by a ring of fire. The creatures were held back by the flames, their screams and growls muffled by the roar of the fire. The friends stumbled back, watching in horror as the creatures writhed and twisted in agony. The ring of fire grew brighter and brighter, until it consumed the entire town. The buildings were swallowed up by the flames, and the screams of the creatures were drowned out by the roar of the inferno. As the fire raged on, the friends made their way back up the hill, their bodies shaking with terror. They knew that they would never forget the horrors they had witnessed in the abandoned town. Years later, the friends would return to the site of the town, expecting to find nothing but ash and rubble. But when they arrived, they found something even more terrifying. The town had been rebuilt, and the creatures that had chased them all those years ago were now wandering the streets, their twisted faces leering out from behind broken windows. The friends knew that they could never go back, that the abandoned town in the woods was cursed for all time. And as they walked away, they could still hear the haunting strains of the piano player, echoing through the empty streets of the abandoned town.
Once upon a time, there was a kingdom in the heart of a dense forest. This kingdom was ruled by a just and fair king named Harold. The people of the kingdom lived peaceful and contented lives, for the king was loved by all. However, there was a dark force that threatened the land, a wicked witch named Morgana. Morgana lived in a gloomy castle on the outskirts of the kingdom. She was envious of the happiness of the people and the wealth of the kingdom, and so she cast a spell to bring eternal winter to the land. The sun disappeared behind a veil of clouds, and the snow fell endlessly, covering everything in a blanket of white. The rivers froze, the crops died, and the people began to suffer. King Harold was determined to break the spell and restore the land to its former beauty. He called upon the bravest knights in the kingdom to join him on a quest to find the source of the eternal winter and defeat Morgana. The knights set out into the heart of the forest, facing countless dangers and challenges along the way. They fought off ferocious beasts and battled their way through blizzards that would have stopped any other man. Finally, after many long weeks, they arrived at Morgana's castle. The witch was waiting for them, seated on her throne in the great hall. The knights drew their swords and advanced upon her, but she was too powerful for them. She cast spell after spell, sending bolts of lightning and fire to strike them down. King Harold was the only one left standing, and he drew his sword to face the witch alone. Their battle was long and fierce, and it seemed as though neither one could gain the upper hand. But King Harold remembered the wisdom of his father, who had told him that a true hero always fights with honor and courage, no matter the odds. He sheathed his sword and approached Morgana with open arms, offering her a chance to end the conflict peacefully. The witch was taken aback by the king's bravery, and she realized that she had been wrong to seek power and wealth at the expense of others. She lifted the spell of eternal winter and restored the sun to the sky. The snow melted, the rivers flowed once more, and the crops began to grow again. The people of the kingdom rejoiced, and King Harold was hailed as a hero. Morgana turned over a new leaf and became an ally to the kingdom. She used her magic to help the people, and she was welcomed into their homes as a friend. The kingdom flourished, and King Harold ruled justly and fairly for many years, always remembering the lesson that he had learned on his quest. And so the story ends, but the legend lives on. The people of the kingdom tell of King Harold and the witch who became a friend, and they say that the sun still shines brightly because of the bravery and honor of their great king.
Summer camp had always been a highlight of 13-year-old Lily's year. The fresh air, the bonfires, the adventures, it was all so exciting. But this year, things were different. This year, something was off. It started on the first night. Lily and her bunkmates were settling into their cabin, laughing and joking about the summer ahead. But as the night grew darker and quieter, they heard strange noises coming from outside. It sounded like footsteps, heavy and deliberate. They all froze, listening intently. Suddenly, the door to their cabin burst open, and a figure stepped inside. It was a man, tall and muscular, with a wild look in his eyes. He wore ragged clothes and carried a large knife. The girls screamed and scrambled to the back of the cabin, trying to find something to defend themselves with. But the man did not attack. Instead, he simply stood there, staring at them. After a few long moments, he turned and left the cabin, disappearing into the darkness. The girls were terrified, but they convinced themselves that it was just a prank. Some of the older campers probably wanted to scare the newbies. They tried to push it out of their minds and get some sleep. But the strange occurrences continued throughout the summer. Every night, they heard footsteps and whispers outside their cabin. Every day, they found strange symbols etched into the trees and rocks around the campsite. And every few nights, they saw the man again, always just standing there and watching them. Lily tried to talk to the camp counselors about it, but they brushed her off. They said she was just homesick and imagining things. But Lily knew what she had seen and heard. Something was not right at this camp. One night, as the girls were gathered around the campfire, they heard a loud thud coming from the nearby woods. They all jumped up, expecting to see the man again. But instead, they saw something even more terrifying. Emerging from the woods was a horde of creatures, half human, half animal. They had razor-sharp teeth and glowing eyes, and they were moving closer and closer to the campsite. The girls screamed and scattered, trying to find a place to hide. Lily ran into the woods, hoping to lose the creatures in the darkness. But they were relentless, chasing after her with their terrifying growls and howls. Finally, Lily stumbled upon a cave. It was dark and damp, but she knew it was her only chance to escape. She crawled inside, curling up in a ball and waiting for the creatures to pass. Hours passed, and Lily sat there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the campsite in the distance. Finally, she heard footsteps approaching. She held her breath, waiting to see who or what it was. To her relief, it was one of the camp counselors. She had come looking for Lily, knowing she had run off into the woods. She helped Lily out of the cave and back to the campsite, where the other girls were huddled together, shaken but alive. The camp was shut down the next day. It turned out that the creatures were the result of an experiment gone wrong. A mad scientist had been using the nearby woods as a testing ground for his genetic experiments. The man with the knife was one of his failed creations. Lily and the other girls went home, still shaken by the experience. They knew that they would never forget the horrors they had faced at summer camp. But they also knew that they had survived, and that they were stronger for it. Years passed and Lily grew up, but the memories of that summer camp still haunted her. She had nightmares about the creatures and the man with the knife, and she struggled with anxiety and fear. But she was determined not to let those experiences control her life. She worked hard in school and went on to study psychology in college, hoping to help others who had gone through trauma. One day, she received an email from one of her old campmates. It was an invitation to a reunion, a chance to reconnect with the girls who had been there that fateful summer. Lily hesitated at first, but eventually decided to go. She wanted to face her fears and put the past behind her once and for all. When she arrived at the reunion, she was surprised at how much everyone had changed. They were all adults now, with careers and families. But as they sat around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing memories, Lily could feel the fear creeping back in. And then, just like that, the man with the knife appeared. He stepped out of the woods and into the clearing, his wild eyes scanning the group. The girls screamed and scrambled to their feet, trying to find something to defend themselves with. But the man did not attack. Instead, he simply stood there, watching them. And then, to their shock, he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough and hoarse. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I was just lost." He explained that he had been a homeless man, living in the woods near the campsite. He had stumbled upon the experiment and had been mutated by the scientists' chemicals. He had been so consumed by fear and anger that he had lashed out, attacking anyone who came near him. But now, years later, he had found a way to reverse the mutation and regain his humanity. He had come back to the campsite to apologize and make amends. The girls were hesitant at first, but as the man spoke, they could see the genuine remorse in his eyes. They forgave him, and together, they burned the symbols and artifacts that had been left behind by the mad scientist's experiments. They vowed to never let fear control them again. As Lily drove away from the reunion, she felt a sense of closure. She had faced her fears and come out on the other side. And while she knew that she would never forget the horrors of that summer camp, she also knew that she had found a way to move forward.
Once upon a time, there was a family of four, the Smiths. They loved to go on road trips, exploring new places and having adventures together. One summer evening, they set out on a road trip to the mountains. They had their car packed with snacks, water, and all the essentials for a fun trip. As they drove through the winding roads, the scenery around them changed dramatically. The green trees became scarce, and the mountains loomed in the distance. The sun had set, and the stars shone bright in the night sky. They were enjoying the journey when the GPS system in the car malfunctioned. It started showing the wrong directions, and they found themselves lost in the middle of nowhere. They were miles away from any town or city, and there was no mobile network. The father, John, tried to fix the GPS, but it was of no use. The mother, Sarah, tried to calm their two kids, Jack and Emily, who were getting anxious. The darkness around them was unnerving, and they had no idea where they were. They drove for hours, hoping to find a way out of the wilderness. The road seemed to go on forever, and they were running low on gas. They couldn't turn back because they didn't remember which way they had come from. The children were getting tired, and the parents were getting more and more worried. They had no idea where they were and didn't have any resources to help them. The darkness around them was oppressive, and they could hear strange noises from the woods. As they drove on, they came across an old abandoned house. The father thought they could rest there for a while until they figured out their next move. The mother wasn't too keen on the idea, but they had no other option. They entered the old house, which was filled with cobwebs and dust. The rooms were dark and dreary, and they could hear strange creaking noises coming from the walls. The children were scared, and the parents tried to reassure them that everything would be okay. As they settled in, they heard a loud banging noise outside. It sounded like someone was trying to get in. The father grabbed a flashlight and went to investigate. He found nothing outside but was even more unsettled by the darkness and the eerie sounds of the night. The family tried to sleep, but they couldn't. The strange noises continued, and the children were too scared to close their eyes. The parents were worried about what might happen to them in this strange place. Suddenly, they heard footsteps coming from upstairs. The father went to investigate, but when he got to the top of the stairs, he saw a figure standing in the darkness. It was a tall, shadowy figure, and it seemed to be watching them. The family was terrified and didn't know what to do. They ran out of the house and got back into their car, hoping to find a way out of the wilderness. But the road seemed to go on forever, and they were running low on gas. As they drove, the darkness seemed to swallow them up, and the strange noises from the woods only grew louder. They were lost, scared, and alone in the middle of nowhere. Hours passed, and they were running out of hope. Suddenly, they saw a light in the distance. They drove towards it, hoping it was a sign of civilization. As they got closer, they realized it was a small town. The family breathed a sigh of relief as they pulled into the town, and they found a gas station and a motel. They checked into the motel and slept soundly, relieved to be out of the wilderness. The next day, they got their car fixed and continued their road trip. They never forgot the terrifying night they had spent lost in the wilderness. It was a memory that would haunt them for years to come. As they drove through the mountains, they came across a ranger station. The father stopped the car and went inside to ask for directions. The ranger was kind and helpful, and he pointed them in the right direction. The family continued their road trip, but the experience had changed them. They were more cautious, and they always made sure they had a backup plan in case something went wrong. Years passed, and the children grew up. They never forgot the terrifying night they had spent lost in the wilderness. It was a memory that stayed with them, and they often talked about it with their own children. The Smith family never took a wrong turn in the car again. They had learned their lesson and were always prepared for any situation. But they never forgot the fear and uncertainty they had felt that night. In the end, the family was grateful for the experience. It had brought them closer together and taught them the importance of being prepared. They continued to go on road trips, but they were always more cautious, knowing that anything could happen on the road.